then they'll treat their spouse with dignity and goodness, and then they'll be happy. They might not be the most successful people because they didn't get the biggest genius, but it doesn't matter. The first, are they a mensch? Are they a mensch? Are they a mensch? Are they a mensch? Then you can pour marriage into it. If they're not a mensch, you're pouring marriage into a broken vessel. And you never go into marriage saying, I'm going to change him. He has such good potential. I'll change him. I'll make him into a mensch. It doesn't work. Right?
How do you determine if he's a mensch?
You have to ask a lot of questions. You think it's an easy thing?
No.
Because everybody lies. Nobody wants to say the guy's a schmo bagel. And they think they're doing the right thing. Oh, he's a great guy. A wonderful girl. But all that as an aside. Where does that idea come? It comes from right here. So the book of Bereshis then, its purpose is, the first pasuk aside, is to teach us what happens when midos go bad. And then, as the Kabbalists will say, comes Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Leah, beginning what they call, the Kabbalists call the Olam Hatikun, the world of rectification. What we would call, they began to fix things up. Abraham's kindness, Isaac's justice, and Jacob's truth began to rebuild human characteristics into which Torah can be poured. So the book of Bereshis, its purpose is not to be a book of halacha, because it only has 3 laws in it. Its purpose is to be a book of menschlichkeit. What happens when you go negative, how much you destroy, whether you're actually destroying the whole world or your world, you're destroying a world. The person who's not a mensch destroys the people around them. They do. And right? Am I right? A person's not, you're in a work environment, in a house environment, you're with somebody who's not a mensch, things the vessel cracks. So this is the human condition, and much more so by Torah, which requires a vessel into which to be poured. So the purpose of the book of Bereshis, the great ones tell us, the purpose of the book of Bereshis is not to teach us about about law, it's to teach us a prerequisite to the study of Torah, to the study of law, to study what Torah is supposed to be. Now this brings, and that's a review of really the portion of Bereshis and Noach together, but it also teaches us what the purpose of the book of Bereshis is. Now this also dovetails into something so very interesting, which I just saw yesterday, which I thought was fascinating. The Torah tells us that when Adam and Chava, when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, it says, Vayigaresh es Adam, that Adam and Eve were exiled from Eden. Vayashke mikeden, the Gan Eden, they dwelled to the east of Gan Eden. And there was the crew, and to the east of Gan Eden, guarding the door of Gan Eden was Kruvim, cherub-like creatures, Veslahat hacherev misapachas, and the flame of a revolving sword, Lishmor es derech eitz hachayim, to guard the way of the eitz hachayim, the tree of life. So, barring the door of Gan Eden are 2 cherub-like creatures, the same that we talk about that are on top of the ark, the Kruvim, either holding or next to them a revolving sword of fire, right, that guards the way to the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, which is in Gan Eden. So
why did you exclude
riddle me that, Batman.
Why did you exclude the eating of the tree of life?
Only because they didn't eat the tree of life. They weren't allowed to eat the tree of life. They ate from the tree. Why did I exclude it? Because that was different. When we learned about Rosh Hashanah, the fact that when they ate, it's a great question, by the way. I was trying to avoid having to talk about it. Not because the reason I'm not talking about it because that was the motivation. There was totally different. There, the motivation we learned on Rosh Hashanah was to find a way to serve Hashem better. It was a different type of a sin, which we could spend a lot of time on. But our world is the postpartum world. The world after Gan Eden, and that's the world that fell, the world of our world that fell, the world we have to deal with. The world prior to Gan Eden is a world we can't really grasp what Adam and Eve actually were, and therefore their motivations are harder to grasp. But the post-partum world, after the parting from Gan Eden, that's our world. That's why I decided to talk about that, not to talk about the other one. So what does this mean? How do you understand about revolving swords and Kruvim? So the explanation is a beautiful, Iluyish is a brilliant explanation. And that is that even though we talk about kina, desire, kina, jealousy, desire, taiva, kavod, honor, really it boils down to two things. One is taiva, desire, and the other one is haughtiness. Taiva is desire, and haughtiness leads to jealousy, and it leads to honor seeking. So it's a sense of self. Those are the two things that truly are the keys to conquering to become holy. The idea of desire is represented by the cherub-like creatures, the face of innocence. The idea of a haughtiness of self and seeking of power, thereby jealousy and murder and all that kind of other stuff, is represented by the sword. Those are the two things that bar us from getting to Gan Eden. What's the revolving sword? So listen to this. This is a phenomenal explanation. So let's say a person is desirous. So they look at themselves and say, I'm not an animal. Why do I have to be a behemoth? An animal does get him. Does also. I'm not an animal. I'm a human being. So in order to avoid the pitfalls of desire, you have to begin to raise your self-esteem into I'm a human being. I'm a somebody. I'm not a low-life animal. Once you do that, what's the danger? You might start thinking that everything's coming to you. And therefore, what do? You want to lower your self-esteem. And then you might be subject to the fact that you're an animal again. It's a revolving sword. It's just it's subtle, but it's a brilliant explanation. It's literally a revolving sword. So just what I think the last one, a bunch more things to talk about, but is this also a tremendously difficult pasuk. The Torah says, and I quoted the verse before, this is after Cain and Hevel were killed and the world began to go bad. So the Torah teaches us, and I had it marked off and it disappeared. The Torah teaches us that Vayar Hashem, and Hashem saw, Ki rabas ras adam, the humankind are behaving very badly on the land, and the formation of thought in the human heart, rak, kol hayom, was bad all day long, and therefore Hashem changed his mind. So there's two things that need to be talked about. We'll talk about the second one first. What's Hashem changing his mind? Is he omniscient? So the answer to that is complexly simple. And that is that Hashem is omniscient. But clearly the Torah wants us to understand the world as a consequential universe. That things happen in sequence based on what we've done. So therefore, Hashem will use the term that he changed his mind for two reasons. One, to teach us that he is free over that which he created. He's not bound by his own creation. Because if he's bound by his own creation, then he really can't affect what happens to us here. So number one, that he's not bound by his creation, and he is therefore free. And for him to be bound, for us to be free, is illogical. Therefore, he must be free in order for us to be free to have choice. So that's number one. The second thing is that it's more important for us to know that we have free choice than it is for us to understand the nuances of Hashem's omniscience. Because the Torah is willing to sacrifice an understanding of his omniscience by saying Vayinachem, that he changed his mind in order for us to know that our choices are real and have meaning. That's the first discussion. The second discussion is, what does this verse mean? This is a verse that other religions have taken to mean that there's a concept of original sin, that human beings are bad. Yetzer, machshavais, adam, rak, halayam, the formation of human thought all day long is evil. So are we bad? Are we born bad? And if we're born bad, it means you can't get unbad unless you have some help that you can't control. You can't do it by yourself. So is free choice not really free? So we spoke about on Rosh Hashanah the following concept. I'm sure you guys remember because it was just like a little point of but we spoke about, I said at the Rosh Hashanah table about 3 times, I well remember it. Mm-hmm. And that is, Rosh Hashanah is about, when you go through Rosh Hashanah, we know, even though we shouldn't really think this way, but we actually know we're not going to be perfect the next year. I don't think any of us actually contemplates that we're not going to need next year's Rosh Hashanah. I don't think anybody contemplates that. So what is it about Rosh Hashanah? What's the goal of a Rosh Hashanah? Obviously to be perfect. Okay. What's the real goal? Rosh Hashanah presents a tremendous opportunity. A huge, Hashem is there. Either you take him or you reject him. And the rejecting him is in and of itself something negative. Rosh Hashanah really represents the choice to pursue a different, holier life. That's the real choice of Rosh Hashanah. It's not a choice. Obviously, it should be a choice in every little nuance. I'll be better in everything. But we do that with a certain knowledge that that's not going to work. Even though we should be doing that. But we know that that's not going to happen. Because it never has happened. But what can happen is the choice to live a different life. That the focus of my will and desire changes. That's what Rosh Hashanah should be. And that has to be made evidence by the changes that happen. But at least that's a doable concept. If you don't do it, that means you are not that. You've chosen against a way of life, not in any individual detail, but in broad scope of a more moral, holy approach to being. That's the pshat in this pasuk. The pshat, the explanation of this verse is every thought they had was negative. They chose negativity. If you remember, we learned, in one of my favorite divrei Torah of all time, we learned, we did this, and we do it usually 2 or 3 times a year, is how do you define your own self? If I would go around and say, define yourself. Oh, I'm tall, I'm short, I love baseball, I love sports, I like a good steak. But how do you define yourself? What are you? That's what you do. What are you? What are you? It's to define your own essence. It's a very, very interesting question. I don't like to ask it because people think they have to answer it, and their answers are curious because they miss the point mostly. The way the great rabbis explain, you are what you want out of life. So if a guy wants a new car, he is physical. Well, yeah, my mother the car, right? Yeah, my mother wanted a new car. My mother the car, right? So the old Jerry Van.
Yeah.
So they.
Only us.
How did I even remember that?
Black and blue more.
That's bad that I remember that. First of all, it's a terrible show. Why would I even want to remember that? But the point is that you are what you want. That defines you. So that's what it says. I want to be holy. I don't always live up to it, but that's what I want. That's what you are then. That's the essence. Now, it's obviously better to live up to it, but at least, so you look at somebody who only wants physicality. That's what they are. They're a piece of steak. Or a lion, ready to devour somebody else's steak. So when that happens to somebody, and they begin to act out on it, there's no hope. Especially if it becomes ingrained. So of course there's choice. There's always choice. But what happens, Hashem saw that the formation of thought in their mind was all bad. That was the direction of life that they had chosen. And were doing nothing and gave no indication that they would do anything to negate that series of choices. And then that series of choices is evidenced by all the bad stuff they actually did, the chamas, the robbery, the violence. That was the evidence. The punishment came obviously partially because of the negativity they actually perpetrated, but the change of mind that Hashem was going to re-examine, so to speak, his relationship with the world as it was then, was because of the formation of thought. It's just an astounding understanding. And that was what changed Hashem's mind. Not even, once he started looking at it, later on he saw the evil deeds, so the evil deeds were what they were. But what changed his mind was the formation of thought. And to me, that's the direction of life that we choose. And we always speak about that Hashem doesn't look so much as what we are, but rather in the direction of life in which we are moving. And that now becomes evidenced from this crisis at the beginning of Torah. That is the evidence given by this crisis. And to me, that is what this whole idea of the mabul, of the fall of humankind is about. Humankind fell not only because of the perpetration of evil, because of their relationship with how they wanted the world to interact with them, what they wanted from this world, and that is what the fall of humankind was. That's what Torah is. The intent of Torah is, it's so interesting when we talk about the revolving sword and the cherub-like creatures. What were they guarding? They were guarding the Eitz HaChaim. What is the Eitz HaChaim? We know Eitz Chaim Hilam HaChazikim, but that's really the Torah. So in reality, the way out of all this is the Torah. So to get back to the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life that's in the Garden of Eden, Hashem gave us a lifeline, which is the tree of life that's outside of the Garden of Eden. That's the tree of life, which will break the barriers into, and for us, hopefully in this world, and Mitzvah Shem, God willing, next work, for our journey into Olam Haba, into the world to come, and into Gan Eden, in our lives, when our turn comes, and the whole world, B'vias Goyo, with the coming older and very many quickly in our days. Amen.
I read,
It's a complex parsha.
Yes.
That's geschmack.
They're all fish.
That's
one of the
geschmack.
commentaries said that Cain was actually born in Gan Eden.
There is significant discussion as to whether I always thought he was, and then I read other places that maybe he wasn't.